Personally, I love Limbo. The Warframe community at large may disagree with you, but I've played him since his release, and I play him for everything. Only slight exaggeration. Not really, it's not really an exaggeration. I pretty much have a Limbo build for every situation, whether it's DPS, whether it's Spy, whether it's whatever you have. But I really like him. And Laura HH, thank you for the follow. Welcome on in, Code Blue as well. Gara, right? That's what we're doing? Yeah, he's my go-to. His passive is, in my opinion, the best passive in the game. It's literally, hi, I deny you existence while giving myself energy infinitely. So... Do you have his base kit? I don't think I do. Whatever. Have a good day at work. Thanks for stopping in. So Limbo's passive is that instead of a dodge roll, he has a dimensional rip. Limbo said, dodging is too basic for me. I need to break space-time. And so he enters his own pocket dimension known as the Rift. And in this dimension, he is unable to be directly affected by things outside of this dimension. So, that means he is immune to pretty much all damage. There are a few exceptions in terms of, like, bosses and things. There are some things that will affect him through the Rift. It's bullshit. But generally speaking, he is nigh impossible to kill when in this state. While also in this state, he gets a flat energy regeneration. And while getting kills in the Rift, he can also get a burst of energy regeneration. Yeah, but you can still revive while in the Rift. You can still do a lot of interactions while in the Rift and still provide for your party. So the entirety of Limbo's kit revolves around the Rift and his control of the Rift. So his first ability is Banish, and this has an augment that can also make it a heal. But it's a cone ability that affects enemies and will bring them into the Rift plane, or vice versa. So if they're in the physical plane, then they'll be put into the Rift, and then if they use it on enemies in the Rift, then they'll be returned to the physical plane. And this is what you start with. It scales off of range. It has some damage, but we don't care about it for damage. We care about it for the Banish, really. Frankly, you're not going to probably use this a whole bunch, except in the first 10 levels. And unless you're using it for the Haven Augment. This does not require line of sight. You can use it through walls. If you have enough range and you know where enemies are, you can kind of just point it through a wall and banish something, which is useful because you can't use this ability, you can use this ability in the Rift, but if you're trying to remove an enemy, you have to be in the same plane as them. So, at the start of the game, if you wanted to bring people into the Rift, you have to use this while in the physical plane. So, you can use this, if you have, enemy radar or something on, so you can kind of know where the enemies are. You could, use structures in the game, walls and things, to banish a target before you get to them. And that way, you can sort of set up without getting hurt beforehand. Because if you're not in the Rift and you're taking damage, you are very, very squish. His second ability is Stasis. Stasis is... Stasis. Stasis is CC, and it doesn't matter where in the Rift they are. It's just a ability that is just localized to the Rift. But this will freeze targets upon entry to the Rift. So, in general, once you have unlocked his entire kit, you're gonna start the match. You're gonna probably jump into the Rift, and you're gonna activate Stasis before doing anything else. This is a duration-based ability, and it's half of your ultimate time. So duration is a really important bit of Limbo's kit. It's probably the most important stat that he has. The other stats are interchangeable depending on what type of ability you're going for. But Stasis allows you to, again, freeze things when they enter the Rift. This is what allows him to be stupid, because he can create pockets of just control, whether with Banish or with Cataclysm, where he can utilize his passive of gaining energy while also being immune to damage from outside sources, because inside sources also can affect him. So as long as you're keeping an eye on your cooldowns, and as long as you're keeping an eye on, you know, the edges of your rifts and etc., then you're pretty much, like, set. Thank you for the follow as well, Get Maxified. It is also important to note that things like, let's say, so some notes. For instance, if a toxin like Osprey is outside of the rift or outside of the bubble and uses a toxin cloud, that cloud will not affect you. Now, if, let's say, you recreated your stasis, but you didn't do it quite fast enough, and they used the toxin thing while in your rift, before you stasis them again, that toxin cloud will affect you. So structures that are placed within the rift, like those like toxin clouds or heat pools or etc., it's dependent on whether or not they were placed before they were in the rift or after they're in the rift. If they were placed before being dragged into the rift, then you're good. If they were placed while the rift was active, then you're going to want to avoid those or break them. Oh, Junie, welcome on in, and thank you for the follow as well, Galaxy Bruno. Howdy, howdy, Maxified. Yeah. And thanks for the answer for that, June. So, Limbo's third ability, this is an ability that you don't really want to use unless you're A, using the augment for it, which is Rift Torrent, or B, if you are ending Cataclysm. What this is just pretty much Rift Virus. Without the augment, all it does is kind of sporadically banish things. It's a radial banish. Yeah, he can stay in the rift as long as you don't leave the rift. So the way that would happen is by either A, stepping out of Cataclysm, B, using your dodge roll again. But if you just dodge roll and you stay in the dodge roll and you don't do another dodge roll, you can stay in the rift as long as you want. Thank you for the follow as well, Hoodie Kid 2003. Much appreciated. So the main purpose of this ability without using the augment, and the augment is amazing for damage on Limbo, because with the Rift Torrent augment, you can get, starting at 30% increase per enemy to your damage, per enemy affected by this ability while in the Rift. This doesn't apply outside of the Rift, only when Limbo is in the Rift. So it's a Rift-specific playstyle that increases your damage and lets you get really nutty numbers. Reaper Prime or Hate. And if you have Spectres as Wukong, would they use their first and make another one of them? So first off, Reaper Prime. Reaper Prime. I don't care about the hate, I use Reaper Prime. Second question, I need to read and process. Okay, so to clarify, you're talking, so you're saying if you used a Wukong Spectre, would they use their first ability and create doppelgangers? The answer to that, I believe, is yes, they would create doppelgangers. Yeah. And welcome, Cass. How you doing? So, the main way that you're going to use Rift Surge without the augment is at the end of Cataclysm, which is his ultimate ability. At the end of Cataclysm, because of how it works and being a radial banish, you can cast this at the end of Cataclysm, which is going to have a relatively condensed sphere. Then when Cataclysm breaks, it'll flip everything that was in the rift back into the rift. Because the Cataclysm breaks, the radial Rift Surge will pop, forcing them back into the rift. This allows you to recast Stasis if you need to, and to recast Cataclysm, bringing everything that was... so you just have like that moment of safety. Though you can also just move around and stuff, but that's a good way of also guaranteeing your protection. But otherwise, you don't really use this unless you're using the augment to increase your damage. I'm glad to hear you're okay. And then Cataclysm is his ultimate, and this is what you're going to primarily use. At least that's what I primarily use when I'm not Yeah, I use Cataclysm over Banish for the most part. I mostly revolve around these 3 abilities, with Banish being a situational ability based on whether or not I'm doing like rescue or something. But most of the time I subsume this ability off. Cataclysm is the dome of Rift. So this is where you create your own little pocket arena around enemies, where you have full control over them by a Stasis. And yeah, so you pop a Cataclysm over a group of enemies. This has a overall radius, but the cast radius is kind of like line of sight, so you can yeet this like across rooms. You don't generally do this, but like you theoretically could, fun fact, as long as you have line of sight on the final destination. So you generally kind of want to point this at like the feet of wherever you're pointing at, so it's more so of a downwards camera angle. He's very dapper. We love him. This shouldn't... I actually don't know what music is playing right now. Oh. My playlist moved on to something else entirely. Hopefully that wasn't DMCA. Oops. It was chill, whatever it was. And so yeah, that's what this is. So there's a little bit of damage, but primarily it's just the arena sphere, and this scales off of duration and range primarily. Those are the 2 stats that will affect the length of this ability. Also note that range affects Rift Surge as well. Rift Surge, the lower your range, the closer you have to be to targets to affect them. The wider your range, the farther it'll affect. Rift Surge is a range-based ability, even though it doesn't seem like it. You'd think it'd be more like Stasis, but it is. Pedrix, thank you for the follow. So, that's Limbo's kit, and depending on how you build him and how you use him, you can make him fit a lot of different scenarios. Obviously, defensive type missions work probably best for him, but he's really good for spies, really good for rescue with Banish, and Rift for spy. Mobile defenses, interceptions, he can work very well for survivals, for damage as well. Certain bosses as well, he can work really well for if they're more range-oriented, like Kayla de Thame, since their enemy projectiles will be frozen in place as long as Stasis is active. So, I know that there's a lot of people who are probably like, oh, Limbo, he's so trolly, he's so annoying to play with, but he's a great solo frame at the very least, and... very flexible between his augments and his kit, and if you have a proper understanding of him. That is my monologue about Limbo, because I play him a lot. I clearly know probably more about him than any other frame. What in the world were we supposed to be doing? I got so distracted by Limbo. Oh yeah, Naja. I love Naja. He's another fave of mine. Was that Subaru? There's a, yeah, like, the quirks are definitely, like, and a lot of his quirks are even, in some cases, benefits. Like, for instance, Exalted Frames love Limbo, because gosh, okay, fine. Exalted Frames really love Limbo because, like, let's say Mesa or Baruch, let's just use them for examples, because Warframe abilities affect across the Rift. So, like, if you're Mesa, I mean, personally, if I was Mesa and I had a Limbo, I'd be like, banish me. Just banish me all day. Because then I can just keep using my regulators, and then I don't get affected by anything outside of the Rift, but I can still affect everything across the Rift. I can just show you what I have for my Archoplasmor, though I'm not, like,